On July 9, 2025, President Trump took to Truth Social to announce a sweeping new set of tariffs, a move that would soon dominate headlines and conversations around the world. The announcement, made in his signature direct style, was both unexpected and bold, signaling a dramatic escalation in his administration's approach to global trade. Within minutes, the news sent shockwaves through the global economy. Financial markets from New York to Tokyo reeled as investors scrambled to make sense of the sudden policy shift. Newsrooms buzzed with urgent updates, and analysts began to speculate about the far-reaching consequences. Official letters were dispatched to over a dozen nations, including some of America's closest allies. These letters outlined steep new taxes on a wide array of imported goods, and set a firm deadline of August 1st for compliance. The message was clear: the era of free trade was over, and a new chapter of economic nationalism had begun. This move marked a dramatic shift toward American protectionism, targeting everything from raw materials to finished products. Factories across the country braced for change as the administration promised to put American workers and industries first. The auto industry, a pillar of U.S. manufacturing and a symbol of American innovation, was hit especially hard. A blanket 25% tariff was imposed on all imported vehicles and parts, threatening to reshape the industry overnight and raising fears of job losses and higher prices for consumers. Financial markets reacted with anxiety and uncertainty. The Dow Jones plunged, wiping out billions in value in a matter of hours, while business leaders and economists scrambled to assess the potential fallout for both the U.S. and the global economy. The new tariffs threatened the stability of global supply chains, disrupting the flow of goods and upending decades of economic integration. Ports slowed, warehouses faced shortages, and international shipping routes were thrown into chaos almost overnight. For millions of Americans, trade policy suddenly became personal. Everyday life was affected as prices on groceries, cars, and household goods began to rise. Workers worried about job security, and families felt the impact at the checkout line and in their paychecks. As the dust settled and the nation tried to adjust to this new economic reality, one question loomed larger than ever. Would this bold economic shock ultimately heal the nation's divisions and restore American strength? Or would it inflict lasting damage on the country's prosperity and global standing? Tariffs are essentially taxes placed on imported goods, designed to make foreign products more expensive for American consumers and businesses. The idea is to encourage people to buy domestically made items by making imports less attractive. In theory, this should give a boost to domestic industries, helping American factories and workers compete. But in practice, the impact of tariffs is far more complex and often unpredictable. President Trump's new wave of tariffs didn't just target finished products like cars or electronics. Instead, they struck at the very foundation of U.S. manufacturing. Raw materials such as steel, aluminum, and copper, which are essential for countless industries. A sweeping 25% tariff was slapped on all imported autos and most auto parts, sending shockwaves through the entire automotive supply chain. Asian allies and BRICS nations, some of America's largest trading partners, faced even steeper levies, escalating trade tensions and uncertainty. The construction and electric vehicle sectors were rattled by a 50% tariff on imported copper, a metal critical for wiring, batteries, and infrastructure projects. Meanwhile, the mere discussion of imposing 200% tariffs on imported pharmaceuticals sparked widespread fears about the future availability and affordability of essential medicines for millions of Americans. Critics quickly pointed out that U.S. producers simply couldn't ramp up production fast enough to fill the gap, raising the specter of shortages and skyrocketing prices for everything from home appliances to major infrastructure projects. For iconic companies like Ford, the tariffs created a nightmare scenario, costs rising on multiple fronts, from raw materials to finished vehicles, threatening their ability to compete both at home and abroad. The policy's sweeping reach left few industries untouched, creating a sense of economic siege as businesses across the country scrambled to adapt to the new reality. Even domestic manufacturers, who were supposed to benefit, found themselves squeezed by higher prices for steel, aluminum, and copper, as these costs rippled through their supply chains and eroded profit margins. The end result? A perfect storm of inflationary pressure, with American businesses and consumers alike caught in the crossfire, facing higher prices, supply shortages, and an uncertain economic future. Ford touts its American roots with nearly 80% of its U.S. sales assembled domestically. But modern cars are global products, engines from Mexico, aluminum from overseas, chips from Asia. The new 25% tariff on parts means even American-made vehicles face higher costs. Every imported engine, transmission, and chip now comes with a hefty tax, squeezing Ford's margins. The 50% copper tariff is especially painful as Ford ramps up electric vehicle production where copper is critical. Ford is caught in a paradox, penalized for global supply chains it needs to stay competitive. The company now faces rising costs on its most iconic vehicles, threatening its business model. When news of the sweeping tariffs broke, Ford's iconic headquarters in Dearborn was thrust into crisis mode almost overnight. The mood inside the glass house shifted from routine to urgent as executives scrambled to assess the potential fallout. The company, already navigating a competitive global market, now faced a new and unpredictable threat that could upend its operations and long-term strategy. CEO Jim Farley quickly gathered employees both on the factory floor and in corporate offices to deliver a sobering message. He explained that the impact of the tariffs would be significant, touching every part of the business. Farley urged everyone to double down on quality, efficiency, and cost control, emphasizing that Ford's resilience would be tested in the months ahead. In internal memos and strategy sessions, the message was clear. While Ford couldn't control government trade policy, it could control its own response. Leadership encouraged teams to innovate, adapt, and find new ways to weather the storm. Bill Ford, the company's executive chairman, took a steadying role, reaching out to investors and stakeholders. He reassured them by highlighting Ford's long history of overcoming adversity, from economic downturns to global crises, and pointed to robust contingency plans designed to protect the company's future. Meanwhile, behind closed doors, Ford's top executives lobbied the administration and lawmakers in Washington. They warned that the tariffs would not only raise costs for automakers, but also threaten American manufacturing jobs and reduce the industry's global competitiveness. Despite these efforts, the tariffs went into effect, leaving Ford to confront billions in unexpected new costs. The company's leadership now had to make tough decisions about how to absorb the financial blow. Executives were frank with the public and the press. Price hikes for consumers were now inevitable. The cost of doing business had changed, and Ford had little choice but to pass some of those costs along. At dealerships across the country, higher sticker prices began to appear. Customers reacted with concern and hesitation, and Ford braced for a challenging period ahead, knowing that rising prices could dampen demand and slow sales. In the face of this radically changed economic landscape, Ford's leadership was determined to protect jobs, safeguard profits, and steer the company through one of the most turbulent chapters in its history. The tariff's most immediate effect: new car prices are set to jump by $5,000 to $10,000. This hits not just imports, but American-made vehicles too, as global parts become more expensive. For many families, a new car may now be out of reach, pushing them to the used market, where prices will also rise. Automakers like Ford have little choice but to pass on costs, erasing any competitive edge. Workers fear layoffs as higher prices threaten sales and production slows. The pain ripples through dealerships and suppliers, threatening jobs across the automotive ecosystem. A single trade policy has triggered a domino effect, reshaping the entire industry. The tariffs hit Ford and GM differently. Ford, with more U.S. assembly, is less exposed to tariffs on finished vehicles, but still faces rising parts costs. GM, importing nearly half its U.S. sales, is hit hard by the 25% tariff on finished cars, forcing tough choices: absorb costs or raise prices. Both companies urged belt-tightening and braced for financial strain. Years of offshoring for efficiency have become liabilities under the new regime. Foreign automakers with U.S. plants face similar dilemmas, as imported parts drive up costs. Brands relying on imports, like Mazda, are in an even tougher spot. The tariffs have upended the competitive landscape, forcing every automaker to rethink strategy just to survive. The industry is in chaos, recalculating costs, prices, and long-term plans. The tariff shockwaves extend far beyond autos. Home builders face soaring costs for lumber, wiring, and appliances, adding over $10,000 to the price of a new home. Retailers, squeezed by higher import costs, are raising prices, fueling inflation and straining household budgets. Some sellers are skipping major sales events, unable to offer discounts after factoring in tariffs. Internationally, allies are frustrated, but some, like Canada, are returning to the negotiating table. The climate of instability is chilling investment and business confidence. The UN warns that unpredictable policy discourages the long-term investments needed for growth. Small business optimism is falling as inventories pile up and sales expectations drop. In trying to revive manufacturing, the tariffs have created new challenges, leaving the nation under pressure. As the August 1st deadline nears, Ford and the auto industry face a future clouded by uncertainty. Re-engineering supply chains to rely on domestic parts is costly and slow, years, not months. In the short term, higher prices are inevitable, changing how Americans buy cars and possibly pushing more to the used market. If sales drop, production cuts and layoffs could follow, hitting workers and communities hard. Supporters say the pain is worth it to bring jobs home. Critics warn it could isolate U.S. industry and stifle innovation. Ford's fate now depends on its resilience and ability to adapt in a volatile new world. The road ahead is unpaved and uncertain, testing the limits of American manufacturing.